We have 12 video sales calls best practices that we're going to talk about. They're very principle-based. Now, these are all small things, as I mentioned earlier, but I promise they're going to make a huge difference. So let's dive into it, folks. Video sales call best practice number one here. Number one, this is one of the most important. We're going to spend a little bit of time with it. Studies show that when both parties have their camera on, that closing rates, lo and behold, shockingly, are dramatically higher. Of course, you already knew that. It's all a matter of how we say it, how we explain it in the invite. And so when we're going to meet with someone over video and we're sending or we're talking with them or sending out an invite, we need to make sure that we do two main things. They explain why we're asking them to do what we're asking them to do, and we get an actual confirmation that they're going to do that thing. In this case, they're going to turn their camera on for the sales call. All right, video sales call best practice number two, and this is the one that gets a lot of resistance from folks. It has to do with recording your calls whenever you possibly can. You're like, I don't know, Marcus, I don't know if my customer is going to allow me to record our video calls. Well, if there's not a clear why, if you don't set it up the right way, of course they're probably going to push back against it. But if you set it up the right way, generally they're going to allow you to turn the record button on. So once again, we've got to have a clear ask. Now here's the thing though, when you record your calls, this is the power behind video. You have this incredible ability to observe either yourself as a sales professional or someone on your team. And so talk about great one-on-ones between a sales manager and just somebody on his or her team. Now all of a sudden they can talk about a call that they both observed, and it's just dramatically more effective. All right, video sales calls, best practice number three here. So do you use a slide deck when you present to a prospect, to a potential customer? I know many of you that are watching this do, and so the question I would have for you is, what do you think the ideal amount of text? In other words, how many words do you think you should have, or at least not go over, per slide? And we've done the studies on this, and we have found that you should never go over, if you have a choice, 20 words per slide when you're on a sales call. Now, why is that? Of course, if it's much more than 20 words, what happens? Well, generally what happens is there's a conflict of attention, a competition of attention. They're stuck between reading what's on the screen versus listening to what's coming out of your mouth. Is that good? No, we do not want competition of attention. And so we want to make sure we limit the amount of text. Yet, when I analyze slide decks, and I've looked at many slide decks for many sales organizations now around the globe, we consistently see that this number is way higher than 20 words per slide. In fact, there's times when I easily see someone average 50 to 100 words per slide. Ouch! Not very effective. Video sales call best practice number four, and while we're on the topic of slide decks, let's now discuss one of those best practices that is oftentimes not practiced. We see this as one of the most common, I'm not doing that on this list of 12, and that is when you're sharing a slide deck, do you share the deck and then just leave it up and shared the entire conversation with the prospect, or do you consistently come in and out of showing the deck depending on the conversation? Because the best practice far and away is this. If you need to show the slide in that moment, show the slide, yes. But once you're done showing the slide and ready to move on to discussion, now have the discussion piece, and until you need to show the deck again, don't show the deck. Once again, it's never about the deck. It's about you, your audience, and the communication that you're having together. So let's make sure we limit sharing those screens as much as we possibly can. Best practice number 5 here. You ever had a situation in a sales appointment, sales conversation, could have been face-to-face, where you forgot the person's name in the middle of the conversation? This is especially easy when there's multiple folks that you're talking to, right? And in those moments when you forget somebody's name, what happens? What do you do? How do you react? Well, oftentimes we don't end up talking to that person as much because we don't want them to realize we've forgotten their name. So what's the best practice? Well, of course, if we're meeting with somebody in person, we want to get everybody's name, but we want to write it down. If we're doing this over video, we want to make sure that we get everybody's name and we write it down. But let's be hypothetical for a second. Let's say that you're meeting with multiple decision makers and they are around a boardroom table. So you're meeting over video. You have 2 screens that are showing, your screen and their screen, but all of them are around the boardroom table. In that moment, how do you get everyone's name the proper way? And there is a proper way to do this, and I want to show you how to do this right now. It's quite effective, especially with establishing your authority and setting a tone early in the conversation. And so what you want to do is, let's assume for a second, there's 4 people around a boardroom table. Jenny is the one that you've been talking to at this point, but there's 3 others that have joined you on the call. So the way that you want to do this is you'd introduce yourself, and after you introduce yourself, this is what you would say. Okay, so now I would like for all of you to introduce yourselves as well. So go ahead and start with your name, and then I'd like to hear your title as you call yourself. Let's try to do this pretty quickly, 30 seconds or less each. We'll start with Jenny, and then we'll go in a clockwise manner. Jenny, you go first. And then Jenny goes. Now, there's a few things that we did there that you noticed. What did we not do? We didn't ask Jenny to introduce everyone. Why? Because we've seen situations, I've actually had this happen to me, where the person that was introducing everyone misintroduced them, either mispronounced their name or mistitled them, right? They could have called them a chief whatever officer and they weren't, or they were, and people are funny about titles, and so you want to make sure that they are able to introduce themselves. This way too, I set the terms of who was going to go next. So it wasn't going to be a situation where Jenny went and then they were going to debate over, okay, no, you go, no, you go. Now that hurts flow. We want to make sure the flow is always moving in a great direction and there's great energy. So when you have a call with multiple decision makers on one screen, make sure you approach it in this light. I promise you, it's much more effective. Let's get those names written down, and that's going to bring us to our next best practice. Number 6 video sales call best practice is once again one of these nuances that you talk about promoting great flow, great conversation, and authority for you as the sales professional. Use this one right here, and that is you always want to ask questions directly to individuals by name when you're talking to multiple decision makers. When you're in a boardroom, silence can be a great tool. When I'm on a stage speaking to an audience, silence can be a great tool. Sometimes even awkward silence. But generally, that's not the case when it comes to meeting with a group over video. So we don't want to have significant awkward silence unless the group is clearly thinking about the answer to a question. And so, in order to eliminate that, we got to promote the flow. The way we promote the flow is not by saying, so what would you all like to discuss today? It's by saying, so Jenny, what do you feel is the most important thing we discussed today? And John, what would you add to what Jenny just said? And Jerry, was there anything else that you felt like we needed to discuss? And so by you asking questions directly to individuals, now it's going to ensure that you have a full participation of the entire group. And oh, by the way, one other benefit to this is that they're not going to be checking out because they know you might be checking in with them at any moment. And if you're checking in with them, not in a gotcha way, that's not the goal, but in a way just to make sure, yeah, everybody's on their toes because they're all participating. They're not going to check out. They're not going to sit there and look at their email while they're talking to you because of the fact that you could come to them at any moment. And so from this point forward, now you know, yeah, I still want to ask the right type of open questions, but I ask those questions to individuals. And if I do that, I'm going to promote flow and full participation.